Shedeur Sanders arrived in Cleveland with expectations, not entitlement, and hoped to earn his place. But according to T.J. Houshmandzade, head coach Kevin Stefanski never intended to give him that chance. Instead, Sanders became the target of a deeply personal bias, where decisions were made not based on performance, but perception. Houshmandzade's claims detail a troubling pattern. Sanders consistently overlooked in practices, unacknowledged in strategy discussions, and if you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. Sidelined from development entirely. This wasn't about being third string. It was about being erased. The long-term effects of such treatment are hard to ignore. Sanders' confidence reportedly plummeted, and his growth stalled in an environment where his presence was treated as a problem. The Browns' move to fire Stefanski wasn't just about record and results. It was an acknowledgement of failure in leadership that stifled potential and fractured trust. For Sanders, the road back starts with an organization finally committed to giving him the honest shot he never got. T.J. Houshmandzade didn't mince words. When he spoke up about what was happening inside the Cleveland Browns organization, it was like a bomb going off in the locker room. No vague hints, no careful sidestepping. He went straight for the throat. According to him, head coach Kevin Stefanski had it out for Shedeur Sanders from day one. Houshmandzade claimed the issue had nothing to do with Shedeur's talent or performance. It wasn't about fit, scheme, or development curves. He said it was personal. As in, Stefanski didn't like Shedeur, not professionally, but on a deeper, more toxic level. Stefanski never publicly acknowledged any tension. At pressers, he kept it business as usual, offering vague coach speak when asked about his quarterbacks. But behind closed doors, according to Houshmandzade, it was a different story. Stefanski allegedly refused to even give Sanders meaningful reps during practice, barely acknowledged him in meetings, and routinely made decisions that sidelined him from team dynamics altogether. This wasn't just favoritism. Houshmandzade called it sabotage. He alleged Stefanski went out of his way to keep Sanders out of the loop, denying him a fair chance to compete and grow like any other rookie quarterback would expect. Sanders himself never directly confirmed or denied the allegations. But throughout the season, his demeanor said plenty. Reporters noticed how he looked disengaged during games, how he stood off to the side during team huddles, how he rarely spoke during interviews. Every time he stepped up to the mic, his tone was cautious, measured, like someone trying not to stir more trouble than he already faced. There was frustration under the surface. That much was clear. You could hear it when he was asked about not getting reps. He'd give short, clipped answers or deflect entirely. It was a kind of quiet tension that builds up when a player knows the odds are stacked against him by his own coach. The games came and went. Sanders stayed on the sidelines. Even in situations where a quarterback rotation might have made sense, Stefanski kept him benched. Fans were confused. Analysts questioned the decision-making. Why was Sanders, a highly talked-about prospect, not being developed properly? Every week, his role shrank, not just on the field, but in team meetings, game planning, and even basic quarterback drills. According to Houshmandzade, Stefanski ignored Sanders' presence altogether. Not as a motivator, not as a mentor, just straight up acted like he wasn't. At one point mid-season, Sanders was asked directly during a press conference whether he felt supported by the coaching staff. His answer was vague, non-committal. "We're focused on the next game," he said. "I just do what I can with the opportunities one get." The subtext was loud enough. The opportunity wasn't there. Even though he stayed respectful on the mic, the repeated avoidance of any endorsement for his coach stood out. Not once did Sanders speak with conviction about Stefanski's leadership, and that silence spoke volumes. Reports from practice were equally concerning. Insiders said Sanders was rarely included in first-team drills. Sometimes, he wasn't even running with the second unit. According to Houshmandzade, Stefanski directed QB reps to other players regardless of their performance. Even on days when Sanders looked sharp, the praise never came. That kind of environment wears a player down. Practice is supposed to be the space for growth, for mistakes, for learning. But for Sanders, It became another arena of exclusion. Coaches are supposed to build players up. Instead, he was getting boxed out. As the Browns season unfolded, the tension bled onto the field. The offense looked disjointed, the quarterback room unsettled, and while the blame didn't fall squarely on Stefanski's handling of Sanders, it was a piece of the bigger dysfunction. By the time the Browns started racking up ugly losses, fans were asking tougher questions. Why wasn't Sanders being developed? Why did it seem like internal politics were spilling into play calling and rotations? And why was Stefanski still holding the headset? The rumors kept swirling. Sanders remained mostly silent. But when he did speak, there was always that underlying weariness. He wasn't campaigning for a starting job. He wasn't publicly demanding change. He just looked tired of waiting for a fair shot. And you could tell he felt the weight of it. The narrative had shifted from rookie finding his rhythm to rookie being stifled. That's not a label a young QB should carry, especially when the stifling is coming from the top of the coaching staff. Meanwhile, didn't let it go. He doubled down after Stefanski was fired, saying outright that the toxic relationship with Sanders was a factor in the decision. There were warning signs, he said. People just didn't want to look at them. He pointed to early season moments when Sanders was passed over without explanation. He talked about staff members privately admitting the vibe was off. And most of all, he emphasized that this wasn't just poor coaching. It was personal bias that impacted the locker room. Stefanski never directly addressed the accusations. After his firing, he released a short statement thanking the Browns organization and fans. No mention of Sanders. No clarification. Just a quiet exit after what many viewed as a drawn-out implosion. And that silence only added fuel to the fire. If the allegations were false, why not deny them? If there were misunderstandings, why not clear the air? Instead, the coach who reportedly ignored Sanders in meetings now ignored the entire controversy on his way out the door. With each passing week, the damage became more visible. Sanders wasn't just out of the game plan. He was out of the team's future. And it was affecting more than just his playing time. It was affecting his presence. By the end of the season, even the most disengaged fans could see the disconnect. Sideline shots showed Sanders often standing alone, helmet on, barely talking to anyone. The eye contact with coaches was gone. He looked like someone waiting out a sentence, not someone building a career. Late in the season, Sanders was again pushed to comment on the situation. He stayed professional, but hinted at what had been going on behind the scenes. "There's a lot I could say," he told reporters, "but I'm here to play football. That's what I came to do." The words were safe, but his tone wasn't. He sounded worn out, like a player who'd spent the entire year walking a tightrope. What should have been his developmental season turned into a slow erosion of trust. And when trust goes, everything else follows. Practice updates near the end of Stefanski's tenure showed no shift in approach. Despite a lackluster offense and clear quarterback instability, Sanders continued to be sidelined from serious reps. He was running scout team plays, drifting through drills, watching other quarterbacks take snaps that should have at least been split. Houshmandzade called it a coaching choice rooted in resentment, not strategy. And with the season ending the way it did, those words hit hard. Because if a coach's personal feelings dictated game day rosters and practice rotations, then it wasn't just Sanders who suffered. It was the entire organization. After Stefanski was let go, questions exploded across sports media. Analysts replayed press conferences, dissected his non-answers, and pulled quotes where he downplayed Sanders' development. The coaching narrative started to unravel. People noticed how Stefanski had bent over backward for other players. Veterans got chances long after they'd underperformed. Younger quarterbacks were praised for effort despite mistakes. But Sanders? He got radio silence. No development plan. No reassurance. Just a cold shoulder dressed up as competition. The Browns didn't just suffer internally. Their public performance tanked. Offensively, they never looked consistent. And while it's always easy to blame the QB position, it became clear that instability wasn't coming from the players. It was coming from how they were managed. As the season came to a close, the organization was forced to reckon with the fallout. Losing games is one thing. Losing credibility with your roster is something else entirely. And when both start happening at the same time, heads roll. Stefanski's did. Houshmandzade's postseason commentary took a harsher tone. "I warned people this would happen," he said in an interview. "You can't run a locker room on ego and expect players to thrive." He made it clear that Sanders wasn't just mishandled, he was targeted. Not because he lacked ability, but because the head coach decided early on that he wasn't his guy. And once that decision was made, everything else followed. Once Stefanski was gone, Sanders was noticeably more at ease in interviews. He didn't celebrate the firing, but he didn't dodge questions the same way either. "I'm ready to work with whoever comes in," he said. "I just want to grow. I just want to compete." For the first time in months, there was a spark of hope in his voice. He wasn't dodging landmines anymore. He was speaking like a player who saw a path forward, one that didn't involve being iced out by the person who should have been guiding him. The irony of it all was brutal. Sanders came into the league with buzz, not just because of his name, but because of his skill set. But under Stefanski, that buzz faded fast, not from a lack of talent, but from a lack of trust and reps. He wasn't just riding the bench. He was being buried under it. And in the NFL, a missed development window can be a career ender. Houshmandzade's concern wasn't just about one season. It was about how one coach's bias could set back a quarterback's trajectory by years. There were people in the building who saw it happening. Staffers, former players, even some teammates. But Stefanski held firm. He stuck to his rotations. He stuck to his favorites. And he shut out anything that didn't fit into his preferred version of the team. In retrospect, the lack of adaptability was a red flag. Coaches don't need to like every player, but they do need to lead them. And Stefanski, according to insiders like Houshmandzade, wasn't leading Sanders. He was punishing him. Now, as Sanders enters a new chapter with the Browns, the hope is that things will shift. Practice reps are expected to increase. Development plans are being drawn. And more importantly, the atmosphere is changing. Because at the end of the day, every rookie quarterback deserves a chance to fail on the field, not behind closed doors. Sanders didn't get that under Stefanski. What he got was a slow, silent freeze-out, and it nearly cost him. The team's performance over the season made it impossible to ignore the dysfunction. Quarterback inconsistency was obvious. Game plans looked disjointed. Confidence was low, and the offense had no rhythm. Sanders wasn't the only one being affected by the culture Stefanski created, but his situation became the most glaring. The Browns didn't just lose games. They lost faith in their process. They had a promising talent wasting away on the sidelines, while veteran decisions felt more political than strategic. It became a running conversation on sports shows. Why was Shedeur being treated like a liability instead of an asset? It didn't back off. He kept spotlighting the issue even after the coaching shakeup. What happened to Shedeur is what happens when leadership gets personal, he said. It's not just about football IQ. It's about character. He emphasized that it wasn't just a missed opportunity. It was a hostile working environment. Coaches don't have to be best friends with their players, but they do have to offer the same chance to compete. Sanders, he said, never got. At his first press conference after Stefanski's firing, Sanders struck a different tone. Still professional, but more grounded. "There's a lot I've learned this season," he said. "Some of it the hard way. But I'm grateful to still be in a place where I can grow." It wasn't a jab. It was a quiet acknowledgement of the uphill battle he'd been climbing. Without ever going scorched earth, Sanders made it clear that this season wasn't what it should have been, and he was ready to finally move forward without being ignored. Stefanski's exit interview, if you could even call it that, offered little closure. No media tour, no interview sit-down. Just a single bland statement thanking the team and staff. No mention of players. No specifics. Nothing about what went wrong or what he learned. That silence made the situation feel unfinished. When leaders leave in the middle of controversy, they owe the public some reflection. Stefanski left with none. His refusal to even acknowledge the Sanders controversy only made the criticism louder. Sanders, meanwhile, stepped up to lead by example. He didn't call out names. He didn't stir headlines. But his posture shifted. The weight that had been pressing down all year seemed lighter. He started sounding like a player again, not just someone surviving a situation. He talked about competing, about wanting to be part of something that grows together. That kind of mindset doesn't come from bitterness. It comes from finally seeing daylight after months stuck in the dark. But the damage done was still very real. Months of isolation, of being excluded, of sitting through practices where your name isn't even called. It leaves scars, not just physically, but mentally. And when that happens to a young quarterback, it sticks. Sanders lost a critical window to develop in real-time NFL settings, not because of his ability, but because of someone else's bias. And while he's still early in his career, that time loss matters. The new staff coming in is reportedly prioritizing quarterback development. Sanders is expected to get a clean slate. But the question remains, how much we have to unlearn from the damage done? You can't just hit reset on confidence. Practice reps help. New leadership helps. But the trust between player and organization will take time to rebuild. And that's on the Browns now, to fix what they allowed to. What happened this season wasn't just a coaching failure. It was a systems failure. No one stepped in. No one questioned the sidelining until it became too obvious to ignore. And by then, it was already deep. The Browns didn't just lose games. They lost sight of how to manage talent. They let a personal vendetta derail one of their most important investments. That's not just mismanagement. That's malpractice. TJ didn't hold back in his final take on the matter. Coaches like that don't just lose games. They lose people, he said. You can't lead a locker room when you're playing favorites. You can't build a franchise when you're tearing down the future before it starts. His frustration wasn't just for Sanders. It was for every player who's seen their shot blocked for reasons that had nothing to do with football. He called for accountability. And with Stefanski gone, he got it. But only after damage had already been. In his final press availability of the season, Sanders kept his message clear. Next season is about work. That's it, he said. I've been through what I've been through. Now it's time to focus on what's ahead. He didn't rehash the drama. He didn't look back. He looked forward. With the quiet intensity of someone who knows what it's like to be counted out by the very people meant to believe in you. And now, finally, he has a shot to prove them wrong. Kevin Stefanski's silence after everything went down said more than any interview could. When your name is all over the headlines for how you treated your rookie quarterback, and your only response is a PR-filtered exit statement, that's not leadership. That's deflection. And the Browns front office knew it. They didn't just part ways with a coach. They cut ties with a culture, one that let favoritism run unchecked and failed to protect its players. When the person running the locker room becomes the source of its dysfunction, there's only one move left. As for Shedeur Sanders, the work never stopped. Even while being sidelined, he was showing up. At practices, he ran scout team plays like they mattered. In the weight room, he stayed focused. He did what pros do. He kept his head down and prepared for the moment that never came. Now that moment might finally be on the horizon, with Stefanski out and a new regime incoming. Shedeur's getting another shot, not just to play, but to rebuild, to reestablish himself inside a system that, for once, isn't actively working against him. Recently, Sanders opened up in a low-key interview, talking about resilience. I learned to stay focused even when I wasn't part of the plan, he said. It was tough, but I had to remember why I came here in the first place. That right there, that's maturity beyond his years. Most rookies would have cracked under that kind of pressure, especially knowing the bias wasn't subtle. But Shedeur kept showing up even when the game plan didn't include him. And that says everything about his mindset. TJ Houshmandzade summed it up best when he said, "You can't coach out of spite and expect to keep your job." And honestly, that's what this whole story boils down to. Personal agendas, unchecked egos, and a refusal to grow alongside your players. It was never about whether Shedeur could compete. It was about whether he'd be allowed to. And that's a failure no playbook can justify. Stefanski coached like he was managing a grudge, not a roster. And in the end, that's exactly what cost him. Even now, the image of Sanders standing alone on the sideline still stings. Not because he wasn't starting, but because he wasn't even in the conversation. He was never going to flourish in an environment where he was treated like a problem instead of a prospect. And if there's one thing this saga proved, it's that shutting someone out doesn't erase their talent. It just delays their rise. When asked if he felt vindicated by Stefanski's firing, Sanders didn't gloat. He said, "I don't want anyone to lose their job, but I do think the team needed a reset. Now we can move forward." That's leadership. That's someone who understands that the job isn't just about taking snaps. It's about navigating adversity with grace. Shedeur didn't burn bridges. He let his experience speak for itself. And now, he's walking through the same doors that used to be slammed. Looking ahead, the Browns face a critical pivot point. They've got talent, but talent without a vision leads nowhere. The next head coach will inherit a team that's already been through emotional warfare, especially at the quarterback position. They can't afford to repeat history, not with a player like Sanders in the room. Someone who's shown patience, resilience, and professionalism when he had every reason to explode. If the Browns are serious about rebuilding, it starts with giving him the fair opportunity he's earned. That process starts now. Reports say Sanders is back in the building early, working with staff, getting reps, and focusing on consistency. There's no PR spin, no dramatic declarations. Just a player getting back to what he came to the league to do, compete. And after everything he's endured, don't be surprised he plays like someone with something to prove. Because when you've had your shot taken from you, not by injury, not by performance, but by politics, you play every down like it's personal. If you're as stunned by the layers in this story as we are, hit that like button and drop your take in the comments. Do you think Shedeur is about to turn the page for real? Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because this saga is far from over.